Welcome to another ProductTank Wellington, our first live event for almost a year since we last met, and we're joined tonight with Asa from Arcanum, and he's going to be talking all about AI for product managers. We talked a little while ago about how we could come up with a talk to do about AI, and my sense was that a lot of people use the words and the acronyms AI, ML somewhat interchangeably. I think there's generally confusion about what it is you can do with these technologies and when you would use them. So I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to come and talk to us about these technologies and about the product that he's building for product managers using AI technology. So I'm going to move away and leave the floor to you.
Sure.
And looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Woo. Round of applause and everything. Thank you. Great turnout. It's not about me, it's about the beer. Thank you, Fortune Favors, for hosting. Much appreciated. And for those that have just arrived, feel free to come in and grab a beer. It'd be sad not to. I will be partaking as I go. I've got a little bit of a sore throat, so definitely needs to be soothed with some fine beer. So yeah, we are going to be talking about AI quite broadly. To start with, for those in the room, is anybody with a PhD? That's good, a few. I just wanted to check, just in case there was some sneaky data scientists that came in and were going to show me up. But another show of hands, for those that are already doing something with AI or machine learning in your product or your company, show of hands, anybody that's kind of with, yeah, the lobby crew. Okay, so we've got probably 20-25% maybe in the room. Cool. So don't ask any hard questions either. But I won't try and hoodwink the rest of you. It will be basically the lessons that I've learned over the last 6 years running Arcanum, plus kind of looking forwards to what we believe is kind of possible, and hopefully you'll see the connection to product management. One thing to say is those who are streaming, you can ask questions via YouTube. Hopefully we'll get them picked up and answered either, if appropriate, during, but if not, right at the very end when we try and do our dynamic Q&A session. Bit about more background on Arcanum. So I'm a non-technical founder of an AI company, which sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Investors think it's ridiculous. But 6 years ago, when I came to New Zealand, nobody was really talking about AI. I only just started talking about AI, so it wasn't really surprising. But at the time, it was more, is this the Terminator or is this a chatbot? And there's kind of nothing in between. It was basically just that. And so when we started, it was really exploring the art of the possible, and that's what people wanted to do. So we did a bit of work with MPI for their fisheries camera project, which is literally still not live yet. We did some early work with TransPower to inspect power lines using drones. They lost the code. They don't know where it is or what they're going to do about it yet. Good use of taxpayer. No, they're not taxpayer, whatever. So it was kind of like there was just a lot of proof of concepts and stuff that people want to see, is this possible? And to be honest, that's still happening a lot, but it's a lot easier to get from what's possible to doing it. And that's really the gap that as Arcanum we've been trying to close over that time period. I think I've got a slide on what we actually do. So we were now working with a lot of local companies and also growing internationally. We do a lot of work with AWS and a couple of other partners, Workato and OutSystems, a low-code platform. And we have a platform that is simplifying the adoption and integration of AI. So again, over the last 6 years, what we really found was it was hard to move from the science to the software. So time and time again, it wouldn't make into production. Time and time again, it would just come up against a whole bunch of roadblocks when it got to IT. Because it was kind of this business problem, if you were lucky, and then it kind of made its way through. You had this special innovation team that was trying to tick some boxes for the board, and then it kind of got, ta-da, it's delivered. But actually getting it into production was just another hurdle that nobody was really able to achieve. And so for the last couple of years, we've been trying to figure out how to close that gap, because even internally, there was the data science team doing their stuff with their Jupyter notebooks and their geeky Syscall stuff, and then there was the dev team, and they were like, what the hell's that? And they were like, well, you know what to do with it, don't you? You're just a developer. And so that bridge was what we tried to build, because it was just such a big divide that it meant nothing made it into production. And when you're trying to scale an AI company, that's kind of a problem when the value is really released when stuff gets into prod. So that's really the journey that we've been going on. So let's get down to some fundamentals. Why should we use AI? So humans are wonderful, but in some domains it gets a bit too complicated. Maybe we get a bit slow, we get a bit bored. And so when you start thinking about doing things at scale or doing things which are super complex and you need very rapid pattern recognition, or you got to process proper big data, as in millions and millions of rows, not thousands and thousands of rows. If you've got to repeat things at scale, humans get pretty bored of doing that stuff, quite rightly. We've got better things to do with our brains. Or switching between domains at a rapid pace. They all become quite challenging. And so artificial intelligence, hopefully, is when a machine can do it better, faster, cheaper than a human. And that's when you start thinking about why to use artificial intelligence. But it's a pretty complex space. There's lots of interwoven Venn diagrams there, which means there isn't a very clean-cut way of describing all the different elements of artificial intelligence and data science, computer science. There's a lot of sciences. There's a lot of computer stuff. There's a lot of predictive. So it's a really interwoven space. And it does cover a lot of academic stuff, covers a lot of computer stuff, covers a lot of business stuff. And really deciphering that is definitely part of the challenge, because you Google what is AI, or Google a diagram about what is AI, and you'll come up with 3 dozen different versions of the same diagram. So there's not even an agreement on what the various bits of AI actually are. But simplifying it down a little bit, you've got kind of artificial intelligence at the top level, if you like, where anything that a machine can do that is better than a human, you could consider, therefore, at a level of artificial intelligence. Machine learning at the kind of next level down, where a machine can learn to do something over time with labeled data and training and all that kind of nice stuff, where you are teaching a machine to do something better and better through data, or through interacting with a bit of software that generates data. And so you're transferring knowledge from the humans to the machines through a process of training. And then deep learning, which is a subset then of machine learning, is really where you've got a single big statistical model that you can train to do something very specific, and it can do something better than humans can. The example on the slide is about 2016, when deep learning models became better than humans at being able to classify images. So whether it be the hot dog thing, hot dog, not hot dog, whatever it was, when machines got better at deciphering between those two than humans, that's when they kind of say, well, now it's at a level more advanced than humans. There's different categories of artificial intelligence. You've got models that work, artificial intelligence that works with structured data. So again, more in the enterprise space, database stuff, the stuff that is being migrated from data warehouses and data centers, into the cloud and so on. So structured databases, time series, so IoT sensors, that kind of stuff. And on that, you're running or trying to build predictive analytics, statistical modeling, again, because you've got a very structured data set. There are nuances to that around bringing in third-party data and bringing weather to be able to predict sales, all that kind of nice stuff. But typically, there's a lot of structured data that you're pulling together. And then the other side of that, where 80% of people's data actually is in the unstructured side, is then in the documents and your emails, your Slack messages, your customer contact center phone calls, videos, a whole bunch of stuff, which is not, you can't just put that into the same models, the same AI that you've got for your databases. Very, very different types of AI. And so you've got computer vision, you've got audio processing, and then natural language processing, which is the one that's probably most familiar to everybody. When Google starts predicting what you are going to search for in the search box, that's applying natural language processing to your search. It's predicting what you want to search for based on your historical searches, but also the searches of people that resemble you in terms of your search history and so on. So there's already in your daily lives a lot of AI at use. And then there's different AI functions. So we've talked a little bit about predicting things, so moving beyond forecasts, into predictions, kind of longer term, but also predicting different classifications of things, predicting actions, predicting behaviors. Associated with that is then recommendations. So when I came to New Zealand 8 years ago, I came from North America where Amazon was already the dominant e-commerce player, and you could get emails to them saying, oh, you bought this, you might want to buy this. When I came to New Zealand and spoke to Trade Me, they didn't even know when you opened their emails. So try and talk to somebody in New Zealand about recommendation engines, they'd be like, no idea what you're talking about, because Trade Me hadn't done what Amazon had done years before in North America. Extraction, so being able to process invoices, expenses and receipts, legal contracts, insurance policies, that kind of stuff, being able to put in a document and get specific bits of information out of it, being able to interpret legal clauses, being able to look at similar words. There's a whole bunch of stuff in that extraction space. And then optimization's a little bit more of a back-end kind of world, and I'll take you through a couple of examples of that as we go through. One thing, or two things, that AI is not is magic. You can't just plug in AI and expect AI to happen. As much as that's what many big tech companies have pitched over the years, and that you can just have an AI and deliver AI. At the board level, that's or the exec level, maybe that's what they want to hear. Are we doing AI yet? Pointing at the tech team, but it's not that straightforward, and it isn't just plug and play. It's not child's play. It's not all that simple. We're trying to make it as simple as possible, but there's still a degree of complexity around it, either on the science side or on the software side. So it isn't magic, suffice to say. And so because of that, there is a journey, to maturity, maturing into the adoption and integration of AI. So everyone's probably heard the analogy that AI is like a toddler, and you've got to teach it, you've got to help it learn things, you've got to move it along, and it is like that, both in terms of the AI itself, but also the journey that your organization will have or your product will have is also, you've got to take steps. You can't just go straight to transforming your whole company or your whole product with AI. There's also a journey to go through on there. And there's foundational work to put in, there's time and effort, there's lessons and learnings and all sorts of stuff. So that's one thing we would say is it's not just straight to the silver bullet and kind of get all the value out straight away. So part of the question really at the beginning of anybody that starts talking to us about AI is, why do you want to do it? Kind of covered off a number of the different reasons that we've seen, like top down, the board, an investor, somebody says you've got to do AI because everyone's doing it, you've got to just do it. But really it's looking at where is the business value? Where's the value to the users or the customers? What are your competitors doing? But also now there's the whole PLG kind of movement, right? This is getting bigger and bigger in product land. So how do you get to product-led growth? And how do you begin to drive those behaviors, drive the events that you want, drive the revenue that you want, the user expansion? How do you drive all of those things through product experience? And how can AI power more of that? So rather than having to do look into the future and speculate where everything's going, how do you begin to pull that into your roadmaps? How do you begin into your practices? And how do you begin to see where AI may be able to help you identify where PLG opportunities might lie? And so this is something that you will have typically seen between the acquisition, activation, monetization, retention kind of process, that kind of flows through that. And there's opportunities for AI to enhance each of those steps, and we'll go through a little bit of that now. Although there is quite a lot already in the acquisition kind of space in terms of AI around chatbots or around the marketing, kind of putting out ad optimization, that kind of stuff. So actually we'll focus more on the onboarding side. But even before that, how should you start identifying opportunities for AI? Well, we should be getting more and more data-driven, and that's kind of the idea. Talking to users, not about, hey, customer, how should we use AI in our product, but how do you actually identify opportunities, pain points, optimizations, recommendations, kind of knowing what AI can do? How do you start having conversations with users about how it might be able to solve some pain points? So when we start first looking at data, and we did a whole webinar on how to use customer data in terms of AI, and these are kind of some of the categories that we came up with. So what you're looking for are, say, opportunities to predict something that will help with the user experience, or optimize something, optimize a journey. How do you remove a repetitive step? How do you avoid asking people to manually enter things that they're copying and pasting from a document, so on and so forth. But then also looking at the kind of event logs behind. Where are there bottlenecks in the process? Where are users getting to a certain step and taking a lot longer, or certain categories of customers taking a lot longer? Looking into the CRM with your interactions. Are there support tickets which kind of help you highlight opportunities for new features? And then getting into the financial side and the comm side, there's a lot of data surrounding every product. And being able to understand how to surface the pain points and that could be attacked or improved by AI is one of the skill sets that we see needs to be developed. And so then you kind of see patterns in that data. You then get to kind of look at customer segmentation and how AI might be able to enhance some of that, the journeys that they go on, the data capture piece with extracting information from documents, interactions with you and your users or between users, and then obviously importantly, how do you turn those into actions that then lead to more product utilization, product engagement, and ultimately product-led growth. So we will use a pretty obvious example in Netflix. We've written a white paper on how Netflix use ML, and it's awesome. Obviously, they are a global cloud native, have 1,000 data scientists type company, so I appreciate not all of you have those resources, but it's just really good to kind of articulate some of the ways in which Netflix uses AI. So think about customer activation. Once you've got them into the front door, how do you then lead them through the pathways to get them to the till? Or how do you lead them into the concession that you want them to see? How do you lead them around to kind of do the things that you want them to do, where you know that if they do a certain thing, that will then lead them on to the next stage of the product, right? What are the mission critical steps to get them to do what you want them to do? And so being able to use AI to look at predicting users like this, or users who look like this, will want to do things like this. And you can then begin to look at the personalization of the user journey, personalization of the customer activation. You can build in contextual nudges to kind of get them to do the stuff that you want them to do, build in some recommendations. So how do you really look at that and have an intelligent, rather than one size fits all customer activation, how do you begin to make it more personalized? From a Netflix perspective, they know that as soon as you add another family member onto your profile, that they've got you hooked, because then there's multiple recommendations getting layered in, and then you get to then see the value very, very quickly. Whereas if there's just one of you, you keep watching the first few things and so on. Even better if you actually connect your Facebook, if you use that to log into Netflix, then they've got a treasure trove of information to really off the bat give you some incredible recommendations. And so for them, it's how quickly can they make it as magical as possible, so then you don't go elsewhere to look for your entertainment. We've done a bit of work with a very not quite so sexy company called Farm Focus. They're an accounting company for farmers, not quite Netflix, but they were transitioning from a desktop legacy product to a cloud product, pure SaaS, and they didn't want everybody to have to transfer all of their the labels of all of their transactions, and so we built the machine learning model to help them transition much more quickly and start predicting what people would label things as. And that just helped them get that warm start to get more activated customers. Looking at customer retention, or kind of greater engagement with your customers. We kind of talked about Netflix with its recommendations. It's got the recommendations on rails, as it's called. So you watch this, therefore you might want to watch this next time. But now, same with Spotify, you've got that discovery path where it's suggesting things that you might like based not just on what you've looked at, but other profiles that are similar to you. And so then you've got that discovery process where it's like, wow, it really knows me. And then you kind of start working into the time of day that they start recommending things. And they get to know if you've got two devices, that there's two people in the room, so it's likely you want more of a different style of movie rather than if you're just by yourself. So there's a whole bunch of metadata that they're using to make really smart recommendations. We did some work for Henry, a local fintech here. They wanted to get to a better customer experience with their know your customer kind of process. And so instead of doing the ID check right before we kind of then started working with them to help build an upfront kind of ID extraction process to help that user onboarding and user engagement process. And then in terms of the optimization, it's kind of bit more kind of back-end, kind of operational style. But from a Netflix perspective, and Netflix knows obviously what device you're on, what your network connectivity is. Are you on Wi-Fi? Are you on 5G? Are you in Apache 4G kind of area? And they then predict how many frames of a film you will need to buffer to have a seamless experience. So they start loading in the buffering to make you have that non-patchy kind of experience. And then they also load in, so the images that we see to highlight different shows are different for everybody. So I will see a different image to preview a movie than somebody else will. So that level of personalization is also very, very data science driven. We work with Javelin, InsurTech company. Again, they had some challenges in entering a new market. They had a whole bunch of old insurance policies that they needed to move en masse to their new platform. And so rather than getting their users to do that step by step, extraction by extraction, we're putting a machine learning model that will do that en masse to populate their new SaaS platform. Oh yeah, we were going to do a quick demo. Okay, we will do a quick demo. So where's Edrill? Edrill's really nervous, sat in the back corner. He only updated our staging environment this afternoon. So for all of those people who can feel his pain, I was like, it'll be fine. So we're just going to show a very quick demo of our staging platform to kind of give you a flavor of what we've been up to. No pressure. Okay, we should be back. Ooh, we good? Sweet. So this is our demo platform. So this is not our kind of behind the registration wall, but we just want to show you a few things that we've been doing. Really, because this is what we kind of discovered was people don't actually care about AI. They actually just care about what AI can do. All right. So we were trying to sell the big dream of AI transformation or that kind of stuff, and what we've got to is everybody just wants the button. They just actually want the little button on their product that has all of the AI power behind it. They don't actually care about all the technology. They just want to be able to know that they can upload an image and they can get the ID extracted. Or you can put in an invoice, and all you want is that process invoice button. Cross your fingers, Edrill. Might not. Oh, there it worked. Okay, you can have another drink, Edrill, you're fine. So all you want is that button that actually says, do this piece of magic for me. And that's what I was really keen when I was chatting to Tokes, is like, how, and this will be some of the Q&A a bit later on, but how do we get everybody to think more about what could this button actually be able to do? Rather than do we need AI, it's actually on a product level, what buttons do I want to be able to press that can do this magical stuff? Because that's really how then we get people using it, rather than going, can we do AI? It's can we just do this feature that makes our customers happier, right? So that's the kind of stuff we're focused on. So I'll let Edrill's heart rate go down, and we'll just go back to the presentation. That's right, Tokes. Oh, I need to share that screen again, don't I? Again, chatting to Tokes, it was how could, none of this is like solve problems necessarily, I'm keen to get feedback, is how could AI support PMs in their daily job, not just in the product, but actually as you do your daily tasks, your daily kind of job. So these are some of the things that we kind of thought about, and we're really keen to keep talking about this afterwards, is we can use now natural language processing to summarize huge amounts of text. So we're doing a little bit of prototyping around large unstructured free text surveys and taking thousands of responses into 3 paragraphs that summarize all of those free text responses, right? So that now is possible. How does that then work? If you've got 1,000 feedback messages from customers, how do you turn that into something which is more meaningful, digestible, and so on? Then there's there's now trivial stuff around sentiment. Maybe some of you are already doing that, but that's pretty straightforward. one thing about sentiment is how do you change the product paths based on sentiment? So you may have a happy path, but what does a unhappy customer experience look like? And how do you begin to tie those two things dynamically together? Similar to the other one about summarization is if you're doing either customer surveys or research, how again do you turn all of those documents or bookmarks or websites into something which is again digestible, usable as part of your ride mapping? We're doing some work now with natural language search, so the kind of Google-like experience, but for internal use cases, and how to use natural language to better identify the stuff that you are looking for. For those organizations that have the joy of being migrated to SharePoint, welcome to a lot of pain. But a lot of us are still using Google Drive, we're using emails, we're using Slack. How much time do we spend trying to find the right thing? And then are there then repeatable processes where actually it's like, I want to run a search and I want the report to look like this. Excuse me. And match those two things together. Whoa. Ooh, good beer. And then, ooh. There we go. And then, ooh. Wait a minute. Yeah. Oh, that's okay. We're done. Oh, wipe a tear. There we go. And then I was talking to the team, and they're like, oh, this is going to be impossible, but I thought I'd say it anyway. If we're looking into the Jira backlogs, any kind of backlogs, and the tickets, can we actually turn those those into something useful and interesting? No, got to keep going. Woo!
I think we should give a round of applause to the guy at the back that just watched the demo.
Absolutely. Very true. It's very true. And so yeah, how do we start using natural language generation to start looking at maybe MDRs or PDRs, that's kind of futuristic stuff. But again, kind of interested to know where in your daily tasks might there be opportunities for AI to kind of give you a power up. And so then how we as Arcanum could potentially help is we do a lot of work on discovery and ideation. So that's what I love doing, is where do you want to go? What are you doing? How can AI kind of add to that? We spend a lot of time in business case development because some people don't know where to start with that. That doing AI thing from on top. So, well, how do you build a business case around something that does involve experiments and iterations and all that kind of stuff? We've done a lot of proof of concepts to production. So again, understanding what the templates for that kind of rollout might be, and then into beyond production, how do you do A/B testing on machine learning? How do you do model management to understand whether it's performing well? How do you look at cost management so it doesn't blow out and everybody gets really angry? So there's a lot of things to consider when going from just an idea through to an at-scale, mission-critical piece of machine learning. And so that's where we spend a lot of our time. Any questions on the floor? Any questions on YouTube? Because if not, we're going to move to some questions for the audience. Oh, we've got one.
Yeah, so you've got like a platform, right?
Yep.
Which
No, we've got one or you've got one?
Well,
Oh, we've got one, yes.
And it's generalizing to lots of different use cases.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously, like, I guess, you know, it feels like each one of those use cases could be a product in itself. This
Correct.
is more like this is like a product question.
Yeah, man.
Like that, about, like, I guess, like your philosophy. Like,
Oh,
oh, yeah.
okay, let's repeat the question.
Should I start
Yeah,
again?
let's do that again.
So
It's more like a beer-side chat.
Yeah. So you've got your platform that basically generalizes to a bunch of different problems, right?
Yep.
And you guys have taken the approach of, rather than saying, look, we're going to solve one problem and build a product that just does that,
Yep.
you've sort of got this generalized platform for a whole bunch of them.
Yes.
I'm just curious about your like decision-making process behind
Yes.
this and like, you know, because
That's there's a very good question, and investors and a lot of people ask me that a lot of times. I found a number of different ways to answer that. They're all pretty unsatisfactory because we haven't, up until very recently, had anybody with any product management background. So when we were trying to build out a platform in New Zealand and trying to validate, get product market fit in New Zealand, there was no one problem or no one industry saying, pick me, only build for me. And so because we were working across a whole bunch of different use cases, whole bunch of different industries, a whole different bunch, it's just we ended up building, by default, a whole bunch of capabilities that gave us a very generalized approach. And so now we've started productizing those through the platform, but now what we're doing is, on the other side of that, is narrowing our focus back down to a particular domain set. So we're kind of more focused on unstructured data, so using natural language in financial services and financial use cases. So we've kind of gone from completely broad, tried to narrow it, and failed. So now we kind of went broader with a platform, and now we're kind of narrowing it again. So yes, we very are just crazy, yeah. But it was based on the opportunity, because we're trying to find product market fit. And in New Zealand, it's great to start a company. It's really not that easy to grow a company, especially if you're slightly ahead of where the market's at. So trying to find customers to give you feedback is kind of hard when nobody knows whether they should even use AI, let alone are using it. So yeah, that's been a bit of a journey for us. But thank you for the question. Anybody else while I'm out and about? Okay, going to keep going around, folks. I'm going to bring my beer too.
Keen to get your thoughts on if there's a certain stage of data maturity that the product people, whether they're product managers or product owners, need to be at to really get the benefit from AI.
Right. The data question is always a big one. So how much do we need? Sorry. Yep, sure. So the question was, from a product management perspective, when you start thinking about AI, how mature do you need to be in terms of your data, and how much data on that data kind of question? So it's getting easier and easier not to need a lot of data, because there's now massively pre-trained models. So basically, like, there's one OpenAI, or GPT-3 it's also known, that we do a lot of work with, and that Microsoft licensed for $1 billion. And it cost them $100 million just to train this model. And that's, so NVIDIA bringing out theirs, IBM have got their own. So there's now these massively pre-trained models which can do stuff with very limited data or no data at all. So then you're just into a configuration process rather than a training process. If you want to look at very niche use cases on a very uncommon data set, then you're going to probably need quite a lot of data. Yeah. But it also depends on the use cases and the distribution of that data. So if you've got data which has got a set of very common problems, common responses, and 80% of those look very similar, then you don't need a lot of data. If you've got 100 different problems and 100 different data types, you're going to need a lot of data, because the distribution of those problems is really flat. So you want to look for ones where there's 80% of your users are going to have their problems solved, by that AI. But it's definitely getting easier and easier to not need a lot of data. In terms of data maturity, which is kind of part 2 of the question, if you're running off spreadsheets, could be a problem. If you're running on-prem, for some, could be a problem. It's less about where the data is and more how you're going to get it into the machine learning and then into the product. So those data pipelines and all the data engineers that you can get your hands on do, because that's more of the problem. It's more serving the data than it is actually the data itself. And so that maturity needs to be worked out, because that's really what holds back people from going from a small lab scale kind of experiment to actually something in production.
Cheers.
Any more? No? More questions? Got some on YouTube? No, come in, Tox.
No, I'm going to come in, and I want to say thank you for helping us get back to in-person events.
Welcome.
And thank you to, I did a head count, so that's 40 people turning up today, which is an extremely good effort on the given the weather today, and how we're not used to doing this sort of thing. So thank you, Asa, and big round of applause.